Chapter 2, A Doubtful Gift. The group stared at Rishi. Finally, Nancy said, "How did you get into the trunk?" There was silence for a few seconds. Then Rishi and Tommy looked at each other. Finally, Tommy revealed that he had not closed the car's trunk lid securely. "I wanted the panda to have some air," he explained. "So I asked Bess to let me shut the lid." The little boy grinned. "But I didn't close it tight." Rishi spoke up. "Rishi see Chance run away from Rai. Rishi tell you more." Nancy interrupted him and suggested that Tommy had better run home. "I'm sure your mother will be looking for you." Tommy skipped off. Nancy invited all three into the house, saying to Rishi, "Then you can tell us your story." Nancy went to get some cool drinks before the strange tale began. After Hannah was introduced to the Hindu boy, she took him off so he could tidy up his appearance. When he returned, Rishi looked even more handsome than he had before. "Rishi have 2 mothers in India. One wife to Rai. She nice to me. One day take Rishi to park. Big house. Mother say, Rishi should live here, not with animals." His listeners nodded but said nothing. "Mother become very sick. Tell secret to Rishi. Must never tell Rai. Mother say she not Rishi's real mother, but get him when baby. Rai not real father. Real mother dead, and real father in America in River Heights." The boy gulped back tears, then went on. "Tell Rishi if animal show bring him near here sometime. Look for real father. She say, Rishi tell him, Manohar. Real father will know what word mean. He think Rishi dead. He will know truth when Rishi say, Manohar." Nancy and the other girls were excited by this information. Nancy asked the boy what his real father's name and address were. Rishi merely shrugged. "Rai's wife die before she tell Rishi." The 3 girls knew that this assignment would be difficult. The man who was supposed to be Rishi's real father might have moved away from River Heights, or he might have returned to India. He could even have died. Nancy rose and said she would go to the police and try to get some information. Noticing Rishi's frightened look, she said, "Don't worry. Nothing is going to happen to you, Rishi. I'll make sure of that." Fortunately, Nancy's friend Chief McGinnis was at his desk when she arrived, so she was able to talk to him privately. She related Rishi's story and asked if the chief knew of any man from India who was living in River Heights. "Yes, I do," McGinnis replied. "His name is Vivek Talak, and he lives in a large house out on Bradford Avenue. He's an importer and a fine gentleman. Be sure to let me know what you find out, Nancy. This is an intriguing situation." Nancy promised to do so and obtained the number of the Talak house. When she returned home and entered the living room, Nancy smiled at Rishi and said, "We have one very good lead. Let's follow it." Next, she asked the boy if he had any idea what the word Manohar meant. He shook his head and replied, "Rishi never hear it, except one time." The boy and his newfound friends were excited as they climbed into Nancy's car and went to Bradford Avenue. When they reached the attractive Talak residence, the 4 walked up to the front door together. Nancy suggested that Rishi ring the bell. Everyone waited anxiously to see who would answer. To their disappointment, no one came to the door. They tried the bell again, letting it ring a long time. No one appeared. Rishi suddenly put his arms around Nancy and trembled a little. She patted him soothingly. "I know this is hard for you, dear, but we won't give up. Mr. Talak is probably at work. Let's find out if any of his neighbors know where he is." Bess and George returned to the car, while Nancy and Rishi walked to the next house. Again, there was no answer. They hurried across the street and rang the bell of another neighbor's home. This time a woman appeared at the door. She smiled at them. "Yes?" Nancy explained that they were trying to get in touch with Mr. Talak. "Could you tell me where we can find him?" "Yes," she answered. "When he is in the United States, he spends most of his time at home, but he travels a great deal. Mr. Talak goes back and forth to India a lot. He's there right now." Again, Rishi's enthusiasm and smile had turned to a look of sadness. This was not lost on Mr. Talak's neighbor. "I understand he'll return in 3 weeks," she said. "Why don't you leave a note for him to get in touch with you at that time?" "We'll come again," Nancy told her. "Thank you very much for the information. This boy is from India and is eager to see him." Rishi smiled shyly. "I understand," the neighbor said. "Mr. Talak is a charming gentleman. I know little about his life, but I believe a good part of it was sad. Now he keeps very busy, and that takes his mind off the past." Nancy thanked her and left with Rishi. "Any luck?" George asked as the two got into the car. "Yes and no," Nancy replied, and then told them what she had learned. She dropped Bess and George at their homes and went on. During the drive, she kept wondering what her next move should be, and finally decided to phone her father to ask his advice. As soon as she reached her own home, Nancy called his office. The lawyer was astounded at the progress Nancy had already made, but said Rishi must be returned to Rai at the Wild-Animal Show. Whether or not the man was the boy's real father had nothing to do with it. For the time being, Rai claimed that Rishi was his son, and he had taken care of the boy since his infancy. Nancy's heart sank at the thought of sending Rishi back. When Nancy explained this to Rishi, he tried hard not to cry. "Rishi's so happy for a little while," he said. "Now bad news come." He pleaded with the girl to let him stay at her house. In his halting English, he told her about Rai's cruelty to him, relating incidents about which Mr. Strong, the owner of the show, knew nothing. "I'll tell you what I'll do," Nancy said. "Instead of taking you back to the show, I'll phone Mr. Strong to let him know you're safe. Then I'll ask him what he thinks we should do." In order to avoid upsetting the boy, Nancy went upstairs to phone while Hannah took Rishi to the kitchen and tried to interest him in dinner preparations. Meanwhile, Nancy had dialed the number of the show and in a few seconds was talking with Mr. Strong. He was astonished to hear where Rishi was and how he had managed to get there. "I assumed he had gone off with Rai. This will surprise you, but Rai suddenly resigned and told his assistant he was leaving and would not come back." Nancy was astounded by this turn of events. Had Rai deliberately abandoned Rishi because he had learned of Strong's suspicions about him, or had he left the animal show to hunt for Rishi? She asked Mr. Strong what he thought. The show owner was perplexed. "One thing I certainly know," he said, "is that Rishi is much better off with you than he would be here. Until Rai returns, would you be willing to keep Rishi at your house? I suppose I'm now his guardian, and I'd like him to be with you until we learn more about Rai. I'm sure Rai would have no idea Rishi is there, so he can't come and make trouble." Secretly, Nancy was pleased by the suggestion. She said she would have to consult her father and Hannah Gruen before saying yes. "I'll call you right back, Mr. Strong," she said. Mr. Drew and Hannah agreed to the plan, but said Nancy should warn the boy not to go anywhere. "He must stay in the house or right on our property," the lawyer declared. When Nancy spoke to Mr. Strong again, he seemed relieved by the arrangement. "If I hear from Rai, I'll call you at once," he promised. "And I will let you know if we learn anything from or about him or Mr. Talak," Nancy told the show owner. Nancy hurried downstairs and went directly to the kitchen. She put her arms around Rishi and gave him a little hug. "Everything is all right," she said. "You are to stay with us for now. But remember to be careful. Remain in the house most of the time, and when you go outdoors, watch out." For the next hour, Nancy and Rishi could talk of nothing but his good fortune. He wanted to know what work he could do around the house. "Rishi always do hard work," he said. Hannah grew and laughed. "So glad to hear that, because I could use a little extra assistance around here. I'll let you know tomorrow how you can help me." Mr. Drew came home early and at once became friendly with Rishi. He took him on a short tour of the house to show the boy mementos he had collected from various places in the world. Rishi was intrigued. He said, "Mr. Drew have souvenir from India?" "Only one small rug," the lawyer replied. "Rishi get you more things," the boy promised. During dinner, the young visitor became very quiet and picked at his food. Hannah was afraid he did not like her cooking, but Nancy and her father thought the boy's loss of appetite was a reaction to his exciting day. They talked of many things, and he answered politely. He offered no conversation, though, until after dessert had been served. Then, from a pocket, he pulled the beautiful ivory elephant charm that Rai had worn. After getting up from his chair, he walked over to Nancy and put it around her neck. "This for you to keep," he said, making a low bow. Nancy was overwhelmed. "But this belongs to Rai. How did you get it?" Rishi explained that he saw it lying on the table in Rai's quarters after the show. "Rishi pick up charm and put in pocket. Nancy must have this," he insisted. "She very good girl and help me find my true father." End of chapter 2.